Okay, the last thing we're going to look at with this sort of series of tutorials is the in-betweening and editing of the keyframe. So at the moment we've got this very linear transition between here and here, and we might decide that we want Earl to move into this position quicker, so we might want to move this frame closer to this frame. Now, when you do this kind of thing, when you're blocking out animation, we call this blocking out, where you just put the basic kind of timings in. It's good to move all the keys together, because each of these individual objects has got an individual key, even though we've only got the one key tick here, because they're all in the same place. So say, for example, I move this key, and I'll show you how to do this in a minute. So I'm just going to select this and move it over here. If I select everything now, you can see, look, I've got the key tick for everything, but that one is now moved forward to frame 18. Okay, so you can end up, with a final animation, you end up with keyframes all over the place, because you want offset in there. You don't want everything moving at the same rate. But when you're blocking animation out and just getting the core movements in there, it's good to keep it neat and tidy. It can just sometimes help with the editing for later on. Okay, so look, I'm just going to undo that and move it back to there. So when I pick everything, look, I've just got these two positions for all the keyframes at the moment. So if I wanted the timing to be different, I can edit keys like so. So if I look at that and say, that's too slow, I can select that, make sure everything's selected using this. So I'm going to be moving every single key. I hold the shift key down, I click on that key, release the shift key, release everything, and then I can just drag this left and right. Okay, so I could move this to, say, frame 15, and then just click off it, and I press play. You can see that transition's a lot quicker now. We could even move it, so shift, select it, release everything, buttons and everything, and then I can just drag this around. I can put it at frame 5, and you'll see that transition is much quicker. Okay, so it's just about assessing it and saying, well, how quickly should this be? So you use your reference footage, you act it out, you do some self-film video, and you see exactly how quickly you move. So blocking this out, I'm going to try this at, say, frame 15. So it's taking that long for him to get into position, and then it's about putting some keyframes in. So obviously, if he's on ice, his feet might slide into that kind of position, but I want him to sort of show a bit of weight shift. Okay, so I'm going to have him hold a pose and then move one leg and then the next leg. So this is when I do start to break up the keys. So look, I'm going to have him, say, move this leg first. Okay, so I want him to move that leg into position, say, frame 5. So I'm moving that frame to here. So his leg's now moving quickly to that position, and then the other one will move, but I don't want that one moving. Okay, so this is where I pick that leg, and at the moment it's moving from frame 1 to frame 5. So I could move this key up to frame 5 so it's not moving too soon. So here there's no movement, or I could copy this key. Now there's a couple of ways I can do this. I can middle drag just to here, and then press S, and look, you can see that leg's static now, and then it starts to move there. Okay. Or you can right click and copy, and then you could go to here, right click again and go paste. Okay, not paste connect, just paste. Okay, so there's a couple of ways, but the middle dragging is quite good. It means you can move keys into a position and it doesn't update the time slider. So you could like move this key all the way over to here, or just drag, press S again, and you'll see that that leg will then move back to its original pose there. Okay. If I want to delete that key, I can right click on it and just go delete. Okay, so right dragging is quite a good way of moving keys about, or copying the poses about, but you need to make sure you press S. So at the moment I've got that leg goes to there, and that leg starts to move after that. So again, I could edit these about a little bit, so I might just move this one. So I'm just going to shift drag this just a couple of frames along, and I'll do that with this one as well. I'll just move this a couple of frames along to frame 7. So I'm getting a sort of a midpoint where they move. So that leg moves, and then that one. Okay. So let me just adjust my time slider so I can focus on this. So we see here we've got this range slider. So I can just drag this down a bit so I can just focus on a specific area. So I'm going to drag it down so that I've got 50 frames visible here. Okay. These little number boxes here relate to the time slider and the range slider. So that the inner numbers relate to the values here, and the outer numbers is to the total. So if I double click on this, it maximizes and minimizes that. Okay, so it's good to be able to view your key ticks. So if I select everything now, we can see we've got some frames here and some frames there, and so on. And the thing to realize with this is it can get quite complicated. You can end up with lots of keys everywhere. So if I pick this, say for example, there's a few clues to this. If I move this along, you can see, look, in the channel box, these red ticks or red dots mean that this is keyed at this frame. If I move it along a couple of frames, you can see these go to a sort of a lighter, to a pink color. It means it's keyed, but it's not got a keyframe on that specific frame. Again, if I go to frame 7, look, it goes dark red. It means there's a definite key there. And again at 15. Okay, so if I pick like this one here, I can see on the time slider, look, it's not showing that tick there anyway. So that does give you a clue. So it's just getting used to, there's a few visual clues to tell you where they're keyframes. Firstly, the main one is these key ticks here, but otherwise also the red here shows there's keyframes on things. So if there's something you don't want to have keyframes on, if you delete all the keys, the red will disappear, the red and the pink will disappear totally. Okay. So keep an eye on those, just get familiar with it and make sure you understand it. So look, we've got the movement here, we need to reflect that in the body as well now. Okay, so when he moves to this position, I might have his weight shift here. So I'm just going to move him over here like this. So he goes over there, then he goes back over there. Okay, so we're just getting that little bit of weight shift. Okay, so it's still keeping the animation relatively simple, but he's sort of striking that pose. Okay, and he's just getting that little bit of weight shift into it. And then we can put more in-betweens in now. So, you know, we've got the foot is just sliding, so we could have it lift up. So what I want to do, I want the impact, the foot to come down a little bit quicker than it lifts. So I could have 2 frames down or 3 frames up, 3 frames down. So let's try 2 frames down. So look, I'm just going to go to frame 5. I'm going to lift the foot up, give it a little bit of rotation, and press S to key it. So it does this now. Okay, so it lifts up in the air, then down, and I'll do that with the other foot as well. This is taking a little bit longer, so let's have 3 frames down, like this. So we can see we've got that sort of movement going on, and if we play that back again, there we go. Okay, so we're just starting to get that weight shift into the movement. So that's what I want you to have a look at now, is that in-betweening, that editing of frames, being able to move them about, and adding those in-betweens. Don't get too many frames in too early on. Make sure the movement's right. I might look at this and go, it's a bit too quick. So I don't want too many frames to move about. I might strip some of the frames off before I start to remove the frames. So if I wanted to scale this, what I don't do is I don't want to actually literally scale the animation, because you end up with frames on in-between frames, not on whole numbers. It just gets messy. So like, you can actually scale frames by holding shift down and dragging a selection box. You can move them. Let me just do that again. Let me do that again. Sorry, it's me clicking. Why is that not working? Thank you. Finally, the middle 2 arrows, look, you can move all those keys about, and the outer ones, you can scale them. But scaling them, you can end up with frames like, can you see these key ticks are not actually on whole frames, and you can just end up screwing things up a bit. So I recommend moving keys rather than trying to scale them. Okay, so if I just undo that just to make sure they're in the right place. If I wanted to change this animation and make it a little bit slower, I would go through and you're evaluating the animation at all points. So I'm going to delete that key there. I'm going to do the same for that one, so I know that that's the up movement. I'm going to delete that one there. I'm then going to look at this movement here. I'm going to delete that one. So look, this is the main transition here. So I want that to take longer. So look, I'm going to pick everything again. And I'm going to move it all along a bit. So I'm going to say, let's give it 20 frames. And that first foot movement, let's give that 10 frames. Okay. So I'm just trying to move the core things. I'm deleting a few things just to make it easier and not get me too confused. You can move those individual frames about, but it can get a little bit confusing. And then I can just say, right, yeah, I'm ready now. So that goes to there. Let's reflect that in the body movement. It goes over to there, let's say. And then he's over to there. Okay, and we can start to put those extra poses in. So again, I'll do the foot lift here. And you can muck about with those keyframes. You can, have in-betweens that you know, sort of give a different rate of movement. So if I wanted this to be a real quick stamp down, I could, let's delete that key. I could move to sort of here, move the foot back a bit, just see how that affects it. So it'll move slowly then quickly. Okay, not the effect I want, but it's good fun to experiment with those in-betweens and see what you can do with them. So you can almost sort of catch his balance a bit sometimes by just moving them back a little bit so it speeds up towards the end. So you can see there's a bit more of a stamp down there, and we'll do that with this one as well. We have that lift to there. I might just move that back a little bit. It just changes the rate of movement. And again, we can add more in-betweens for this, so a bit more of an up, down. So you can see his balance has gone a bit there. So let's correct his balance a bit. Like that. And then this one, let's get his balance more over here. Like so. And then we can play that back and just, so he's kind of getting in position. It's a bit abrupt at the ending, but we can add some sort of softening kind of moves at the end. So what I'd do at the end here, as he goes into that position, I'd probably get this keyframe here and just move it along a little bit. So his body is settling just a few frames later. So let's have a look. Like that. So look, we're starting to get that offset into the animation now. So the body moves into position, the foot's placed, but the body finishes its movement a few frames later. Okay, let's have a look at that now. And we can then do a little bit of kind of settling movement. So if it goes like this, it goes beyond, and then we could just have it come back. So that's 24, about 10 frames. Let's just have it carry on a little bit and then settle back. So there's just a sort of a little bit of a settling movement there. So we're keeping it fairly simple at the moment, but it's showing you just the basics of just putting in-betweens in and editing those in-betweens, deleting frames, and so on. If you go to any of your frames and right-click, you've got a few options here to muck about with it, and we can get into tangents and looking at the graph editor as well. We'll have a look at that in class a little bit more, but hopefully just doing it the way we're doing it at the moment, the animation should be fairly straightforward. But we're now getting that kind of transition in between our poses, so we can then get, you know, a more realistic kind of movement between each pose in our sequence. Okay.